My name is Marilyn Carter, and I was 66 when it all happened. A retired librarian from a small town in Vermont. I had lived a quiet life filled with books, tea, and a kind of silence that was more comfort than loneliness. My husband passed away 6 years ago, and since then I had been managing just fine on my own until the stairs in my house became too much, and the Vermont winters started biting a little harder. That was when my son Dylan and his wife, Ashley, made the offer. They said it with warm smiles and open arms. "Why don't you move in with us, Mom? We have plenty of space. The kids would love having you around. It'll be easier for everyone." I hesitated, of course. I didn't want to intrude, but they insisted. Ashley even hugged me and said, "This is your home now. You'll have your own room, privacy. We trust you." So I moved into their house, a large, modern home just outside Hartford. It was all white walls, brushed metal, and clean lines. It looked like a catalog, no clutter, no softness, just systems and silence. My room was on the ground floor, with a door that closed but didn't really separate me from the rest of the house. Ashley had a lot of opinions about how things should be, where I folded the towels, what I put in the pantry, even how I arranged the pillows. I tried not to get in the way. I picked up the kids from school. I cooked. I wiped the counters twice. I stayed useful. I stayed small. Then one morning in early spring, Ashley knocked on my door, already dressed for travel. She and Dylan were going to Hawaii for a week, a couple's getaway, just the two of them. She smiled that rehearsed smile and handed me a bottle of Merlot. "For your quiet evenings," she said. They left with a wave and gratitude in their voices. They said they trusted me. But what I didn't know yet was this wasn't about trust at all. It was about control, and I was about to find out just how closely I was being watched. The morning they left, I stood on the porch and watched their car disappear down the quiet street. The sun was just rising, casting a soft golden light across the neatly trimmed lawn. The children had waved sleepily from the back seat, and Ashley had reminded me one last time: water the garden, help yourself to anything in the fridge, and relax. I stepped back inside and closed the door gently behind me. The house was silent. No footsteps, no cartoons playing in the background, no dishwasher humming, just stillness. I wandered through the kitchen, ran my fingers along the cool marble island, and glanced at the bottle of wine on the counter. There was a note taped to it in Ashley's perfect script: "For your quiet evenings. Thank you for everything, Marilyn." I should have felt appreciated. Instead, I felt something else, something I couldn't name yet. Not fear, not suspicion, just a subtle discomfort. Like being in a hotel room where everything is too clean, too untouched. I opened the fridge and found it fully stocked, pre-cut vegetables in labeled containers, glass bottles lined up like soldiers on a shelf, even fresh herbs in a tiny water jar. It felt curated, not lived in, as if someone had prepared the house for a photo shoot, not a family vacation. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The blinds were half open, letting in just enough morning light to stretch across the hardwood floors. I opened a book and tried to settle in, but something tugged at the edge of my attention. The house didn't feel empty. It felt expectant. Later, I walked through the living room and noticed how every object was in place. A diffuser quietly pushed eucalyptus into the air. The books on the shelves were sorted by color, not by author or subject. I pulled one down. Its pages were stiff, unread. The guest bathroom lights turned on automatically as I stepped in. The mirror was spotless. I looked at myself a little longer than usual. My face was familiar, but my eyes looked different, curious, alert, like I was waiting for something to happen. That night, I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. And that's when I saw it. A small red light, blinking slowly from the ceiling. At first I thought it was a smoke detector, but the longer I stared at it, the less certain I became. The red light blinked like a pulse, slow, steady, deliberate. I lay there beneath it, my hands folded on my stomach, telling myself not to be dramatic. It was probably a sensor, I thought. Or a high-tech smoke alarm. This was Ashley's house, after all. She loved her smart devices. But the feeling in my gut told me something different. I had spent decades in a school building where surveillance was discreet but ever-present. I knew what modern cameras looked like. And I knew what it felt like to be watched. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I went for a walk, bought myself a croissant from the corner bakery, and sat at the park to watch children learn how to ride their bikes. It was a sweet distraction until I returned home. The moment I walked through the front door, the silence felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. I started noticing things I had missed before. The faint sound of a click when I entered the laundry room. The hallway lights, triggered too quickly by motion. The way the Alexa device lit up the moment I muttered something to myself. It was all too reactive, too aware. And then, like a whisper rising from memory, I remembered something Ashley had said a few weeks earlier. We love our smart home. It listens better than the kids. That night, I stood beneath the blinking light again. This time I pulled over a chair. My knees ached as I climbed up, my hand brushing the ceiling. Up close I could see it just barely. A tiny lens cleverly hidden behind a plastic casing. Not a smoke detector, a camera. It had been recording me. I stepped down slowly. My fingers trembled not from fear but from realization. Whatever peace I had begun to feel in this house cracked beneath that blinking light. I wasn't a guest, I was a subject. I stood in the middle of the room and looked around. How many more were there? How long had they been on? And why hadn't anyone told me? I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere on a beach, Ashley might be sipping a cocktail and opening an app, watching me in real time. Watching what I wore, how I moved, whether I cried. The house wasn't just quiet, it was listening, watching, recording. And I knew, without a doubt, that trust had never been part of this arrangement. By morning, something in me had shifted. I wasn't scared anymore, I was focused. I made coffee like usual, but every motion felt sharper. I moved quietly through the house, observing instead of participating. I needed to know just how deep this went. I started in the living room. Pretending to dust, I scanned every corner, every device. Behind a row of art books that had never been opened, I found a small black disc. Another camera, its lens hidden behind a decorative sticker. In the dining room, a lens tucked inside the modern light fixture, angled down toward the table. In the hallway, a tiny black dot inside the thermostat. Above the washer in the laundry room, another blinking eye behind a sleek plastic shell. It was everywhere, not security, surveillance. I took notes in a small notebook I found in the junk drawer, a list room by room of where I was being watched. Then I went upstairs. Ashley had always told me her office was private, sensitive work, freelance clients. The door was usually locked, but that day it wasn't. The knob turned with a soft click, and I paused on the threshold. The room was nothing like the rest of the house. It wasn't cold or curated, it was busy. Cables ran across the carpet, labeled boxes filled the shelves. On the desk sat a laptop, monitor, and a console with blinking green and amber lights. I sat down. The computer was on, no password prompt. On the desktop were 2 folders, logs and footage. I opened footage. The files were named by room and date. Kitchen _2024_05_07. Bedroom _2024_05_08. Guest room _2024_05_09. I clicked one. There I was, sitting in the living room, reading. I watched myself sip tea, rub my temple, adjust the blanket, alone, private, unaware. I clicked another. Me in the kitchen, in my robe, washing dishes, talking to myself about the weather. My voice low, fragile, intimate, and it was all there. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Then I saw another folder, clips. To a side were short videos, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, all labeled crying, talking to self, unusual behavior. They were studying me, categorizing me, not just watching but documenting. I sat frozen, the mouse still in my hand. Then I clicked one last file. Ashley. E. She was on a video call, laughing, holding a glass of wine, speaking to someone I didn't recognize. She still doesn't know she's on camera, she said, almost giddy. It's honestly kind of sad. She talks to herself more than the kids. It's like she's narrating her loneliness. The other person laughed. Ashley kept going. I think we could even cut together a short doc. Portrait of the Forgotten Matriarch. I mean, it writes itself. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just sat in that chair and listened to her voice echo through the wires of the house she built around me. A dollhouse, that's what it was. And I was the exhibit. But not anymore. I left the office without closing a thing. The folder remained open on the screen, Ashley's voice still faintly echoing behind me. I closed the door softly, not out of fear, but out of habit. It was the same gentleness I once used when Dylan was a baby, tiptoeing past his crib so he wouldn't wake. Only now, I wasn't protecting him, I was protecting myself. The rest of the house felt colder after that. I didn't trust the silence anymore. It wasn't the kind that wrapped around you like a blanket, it was the kind that pressed against your skin, waiting to be broken. That afternoon, I took inventory. I walked the house with purpose, tracing wires, spotting devices, mentally charting every place I had been unknowingly watched. Then I reached into the cardigan I always wore and pulled out a flash drive, an old one, the kind I used to save Dylan's baby photos on. The irony wasn't lost on me. I plugged it into the desktop tower in Ashley's office. The folders blinked open. I copied everything from the footage and clips folders. It was slow, but steady, like an act of quiet rebellion. While the files transferred, I opened another cabinet, sifting through manuals, receipts, and warranties. There it was, a custom surveillance package. Every room listed, including mine, signed and paid for by Ashley. I found a leather-bound binder marked security authorization. Inside, legal clauses about data use, research access, and video storage. Ashley's signature was at the bottom, in the same blue ink she used to write grocery lists on the fridge. They hadn't just watched me, they had institutionalized it. I gathered the documents I needed. Not everything, just enough. Then I printed 3 photos from the surveillance clips, one of me reading, one of me cooking, and one where I was simply sitting, lost in thought. Quiet moments, human moments, the kind no one has the right to steal. I wrote a short letter and placed it, along with the photos, in an envelope. Then I mailed it to myself certified, a trick I had learned long ago when I worked at the library, during a property dispute. It would be time-stamped, documented, legally undeniable. That night, I filmed myself. I sat in the armchair near the window, looked directly into the only camera I hadn't touched, and spoke. Not with anger, not with accusation. Just clarity. I said, I was never asked. I was never informed, but I know now, and I will no longer be small, silent, or compliant just to keep a seat at your table. 10 minutes, one unshakable truth. So then I sent the video to my personal email and to John, an old friend who once told me, if you ever need anything, call. It was time. They came home on a Thursday evening just after sunset. I was already in the garden watering the roses. I didn't rush inside. I didn't stand to greet them. I simply sipped my tea and watched. Ashley's laugh rang out first, bright, practiced, a sound designed to fill silence. Dylan followed her up the walkway, pulling their matching luggage. They didn't notice me at first. Not until the front door opened and silence hit them like a wall. I imagined the scene clearly. The kitchen lights on, 3 photographs neatly arranged on the counter, my handwritten note beside them. The camera's still in place, but no longer their secret. A few minutes passed. Then Dylan came out. He saw me sitting there, still in my gardening gloves, still as the twilight. He walked over slowly and asked if we could talk. I nodded toward the chair across from me. He sat with a stiffness I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager caught lying about a broken vase. I know what you saw, he began, his voice low. It's not what it looks like. That was the first lie. He said the cameras were for security, that they'd been installed months ago when a neighbor's house got broken into. He said they'd forgotten to turn them off, that it wasn't personal, that I was family. I let him finish. Then I asked, gently, would you feel trusted if someone recorded your private moments for months without telling you? He didn't answer right away. Ashley came outside then. Her arms were crossed, her jaw clenched. She didn't sit. Instead, she said, I'm hurt that you went through our things, that you snooped, that you sent files to a lawyer. I looked up at her, calm and steady. If being discovered hurts you, I said, perhaps ask why it was something you needed to hide. She didn't reply. I told them I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised anymore. I was resolved. Why had consulted a lawyer? I had documented everything, my financial contributions to their home, the unpaid caregiving hours, the gifts that were never really gifts. I had copies of the footage, equipment invoices, and the authorization files. I had backup drives stored off-site. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but Dylan touched her arm. He looked at me, really looked, for the first time in years. Not as the helper, not as the background presence, but as someone who saw everything. What do you want? He asked. I answered plainly, I want space. Legal, physical, emotional. I want repayment for what I've invested. And I want out. Another silence settled between us, heavier than before. Dylan nodded slowly. I understand, he said. Ashley turned and walked inside without a word. I stood, brushed soil from my gloves, and walked past Dylan toward the house. He didn't follow. That night, I began packing. Books, letters, the blanket from college, nothing of theirs. I slept with the blinds open. I didn't check the ceiling. I didn't need to. They would never look at me the same way again. And that was exactly the point. The morning after our conversation, I called John. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm with recognition. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, but he listened as if no time had passed. I told him everything, what I found, what I recorded, and what I had given over the years: financial support, childcare, emotional labor, silence. He said, we didn't need to make a scene. We just needed to be clear. By the end of the week, we had drafted a formal proposal. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. Professional, calm, unshakable. I had contributed $40,000 toward the down payment on their house 5 years ago. Ashley had called it a gift in person, but her thank you email read differently. Thank you for investing in our future. John highlighted that phrase. The letter outlined a repayment plan, or alternatively, a formal equity share to be converted into housing assistance for new residents. It also included a clause requesting the removal of all surveillance devices and a written acknowledgement of privacy breach. I handed the sealed envelope to Dylan one evening. He didn't open it right away. He just held it, nodding quietly. Ashley barely spoke to me after that. She moved through the house like a shadow, never in the same room for long, always a few steps ahead or behind. The cameras remained disabled. I made sure of it. And a few days later, Dylan called me from work. He said they had read the letter. They didn't want a legal battle. They wanted to settle. We met in the dining room the next day. I wore the navy sweater Michael once said made me look too sharp to be ignored. He would have liked this moment. John joined us via video call. Dylan did most of the talking. He said they would repay the full amount from their equity line. They would also provide an additional stipend for relocation and sign a written statement acknowledging the breach. Ashley nodded but said nothing. Her eyes stayed on the table. I didn't gloat. I didn't even smile. I simply said, thank you. This wasn't revenge. It was recognition. Recognition for the years I had given quietly, without compensation, without acknowledgement. My time, my presence, my worth. When the terms were signed, John said, that's a clean exit. And I felt something deep in my chest finally loosen, not joy exactly. Relief. The next morning I began searching for a new place. Not something grand, just something mine. I found a small one-bedroom cottage at the edge of town. Blue door. Ivy-covered fence. The owner, a widow named Eleanor, offered me lemonade on the porch before handing me the keys. I think you'll be happy here, she said. And I believed her. Moving out was quiet. No drama, no fanfare. I packed my things with care, just a few sweaters, my books, old letters from college friends, and the photo of Michael and me from our trip to Cape Cod. I left no note. I owed them nothing more. Dylan helped carry the boxes. Ashley didn't come. I didn't expect her to. When he placed the last one down in my new living room, Dylan looked around the space. It was small, cozy. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor. He said it felt peaceful. It suits you, he added. I offered him tea. He declined. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure. Like he wanted to say something meaningful but didn't have the words. So I let the silence speak. As he left, he turned once and said, thank you, not for the past, but for how you handled the end of it. I nodded. Then I closed the door behind him, gently, and locked it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was home. That first morning in the cottage, I woke up just before sunrise, not from obligation, but from something softer. Curiosity maybe, peace. The room was still and cool, but it wasn't the silence of surveillance. It was the kind that holds you, not judges you, the kind that lets you breathe. I padded barefoot into the kitchen. The floor creaked beneath me, and I smiled. No one would scold me for making noise too early. I filled the kettle, humming an old tune I used to sing to Dylan when he was small. The sound drifted through the air, complete and unobserved. When the water boiled, I stepped outside onto the porch. The garden was mostly wild ivy along the fence, rosemary in the corners, patches of flowers I couldn't name. I breathed in the morning, and for once, I didn't feel the need to shrink. Later that day, I unpacked the last of my books and arranged them not by color, not by theme but by memory. The ones I read during summer storms. The ones Michael used to fall asleep to. The ones that carried me through widowhood. By the third day, I had rituals again. I napped without apology. I wrote down things that made me smile: a blue jay on the railing, the scent of lemon balm, the way sunlight hit the window at 3 p.m. I bought a wind chime from the Sunday market and hung it by the back door. Its song was uneven, but it made me feel less alone. I started writing little notes to myself, just one sentence a day. You are not invisible. Your life is not a fait d'oeuvre borrowed. You belong here. Dylan brought the children by 2 weeks later. They ran barefoot through the grass, and I let them. No one behind me hissed about stains or noise. When Dylan left, he said, "You seem peaceful." That was the word. I wasn't performing anymore. I wasn't enduring. I was living. Fully. Freely. And at last, quietly, I was seen.